If you're a cellist, there's a good chance that you've had to take to the sky with your beloved instrument. And if you haven't, you very well may in the future. But I reckon that there's an even greater chance that you've seen the myriad horror stories of airlines mega mistreating people who try to fly with a cello. These problems are so embedded in our culture that the late great Lynn Harrell was actually featured on Stephen Colbert after Delta banned both him and his cello from their frequent flyer program. Well, I have flown a ton with my cello over the past 10 plus years, and thus far, I've never had an issue. Part of that is just dumb luck, and hopefully I didn't jinx it by saying this just now. But I think a lot of it can be attributed to the tips that I want to share with you today. Now, before we start, you may have seen all these headlines in the thumbnail about people getting kicked off of flights, denied boarding, whatever it is. I want to make it clear that I'm not blaming them for that. I'm guessing that this can be attributed to bad luck. So with that disclaimer out of the way, please fasten your seatbelt, locate your nearest emergency exit, and take note of the fact that should an oxygen mask drop from the ceiling, the bag may not inflate, but rest assured that oxygen is flowing. And let's take to the sky. Chapter 1. You can, but should you? There are a lot of reasons to travel with your cello. Maybe you have an audition, maybe you have a gig, or maybe you're going home for Thanksgiving and you want to be able to sneak away and practice Popper when your uncle starts getting a little bit too political at the dinner table. I know it had nothing to do with the price of eggs, Gary. Whatever the reason, you need to start by deciding if you'll take your personal instrument at all, and if so, how. One thing I like to do is see if I can borrow one at my destination, especially if I'm going far away. When I went to China, I borrowed one in Beijing. And when my friend asked me to play their wedding in Mexico, I borrowed one there. By the way, I've still not fully forgiven that friend, who is a cellist, for asking me to play Bach 6. Great piece, but incredibly terrifying. And I'm continuing this trend. I'm going long haul for some performances in a few months, and I'm opting to borrow one at my destination too. But borrowing a cello isn't always feasible. Sometimes there isn't one available, but more likely, you might need your cello. After all, if you're rehearsing a concerto 11 hours after you land, you're not going to have time to get accustomed to a completely new instrument. And especially if you have an orchestra audition, you're going to want to bring whatever cello you've been woodshedding on all this time, given how important laser accuracy is and how much is at stake. Depending on where you're going, you may want to start by looking into driving. Now that could just be the Midwestern dad and me talking and saying to his family, oh, well, it's only a 17-hour drive, why would we fly there? But really, sometimes it is the best choice if it's an option that's available. For example, I opted to drive to the audition for the job that I have now in Jacksonville, and I'm glad I made that choice because it made this particular experience way more comfortable. You can weigh the pros and cons yourself. Just remember that it may be an option depending on the distance and logistics. Okay, so if you've made it this far, you've probably decided that yes, you are going to fly with your wooden baby. There are two main ways to do this. One is extremely safe, and the other puts your cello in extreme peril. Let's start with the extreme peril one. It is possible to bring a cello as checked luggage. Bassists have to do that all the time, since even if they buy a seat, there's no room for a bass in that cabin. Now this is the route that I took when I went to New Zealand, but I brought a super cheap cello and one that did not have nearly as much sentimental value as my main one. Plus, it was packed super well. They make flight cases for celli that are specifically designed to bring your cello in a cargo hold. And they can be augmented by doing things such as placing foam under various parts of the cello. The last time I was ever involved in anything like this, though, was over 16 years ago, so I'm not exactly a fountain of knowledge on this. But even with the best packing, if you've done what I've done and looked out the window of a plane and see how those baggage handlers just chuck those bags all around the tarmac, you might want to think twice. The point is, if you're considering checking your cello, do a bunch of research with somebody who is not me. Now, like I said, I don't check my cello, but if you're looking into it, I will leave some preliminary resources in the description. No guarantees on my end, but you can start there. The only truly safe way to fly with your cello is to have it in the cabin with you. It's a hassle for sure, and it's definitely expensive, but it is the gold standard in cello flight. So now we arrive at the big question. How do you make this journey without your experience mirroring one of these articles? How do you keep your cello safe, and how do you dot your I's and cross your T's to avoid getting stuck in an abhorrently carpeted terminal? Chapter 2. Book it right. If you're flying with a cello, you have to go through a lot more preparation than if you're just booking a quick, simple trip for yourself. There are rules to follow, pitfalls to navigate, and definitely airlines to avoid. I've only ever brought a cello as cabin baggage on US airlines, because I was born and raised and still live in America. But some of these tips will still hopefully be helpful to people all across the flat earth. Just kidding. First things first, cello gets the window seat and you go next to it. Johan, Dad's filming a video. Can you wait and chew on stuff till like after I'm done? Thank you. Anyway, after all, if there's an emergency and people have to climb over an inanimate object to get out, that's not a good situation. By the same token, the cello can't be in an exit row, and by extension, you sadly cannot either. If you're on a small jet, then maybe you'll get a whole side of the row to yourself with the cello. Otherwise, you're relegated to the middle. Sorry. Oh, but hey, middle does get both armrests, so we'll take our little wins where we can get them. Not sure how this would work out on a tiny little puddle jumper with one seat, and an aisle in the middle. That's something you'll have to research if you think you'll be in a situation like that. Anyway, you need to set your seats in advance, and unless you have frequent flyer status that allows you to select them for free or you're on a very generous airline, make sure to avoid basic economy. I got in hot water for that once back in the day when somebody was flying me out for a performance. They booked me basic economy with the cello, and because of that, I had to wait and get on a later flight. Lesson learned. Secondly, it matters what airline you fly. Budget airlines are great for the cost-conscious adventurer, but they can be nightmares when you're trying to fly with an instrument. I'm sure some are fine, but I prefer to stick with legacy carriers who are probably going to have a bit more experience with having a cello on board. Especially given some of the stories I've seen about airlines like Frontier. In a way, this makes sense. Low-cost carriers are more geared towards leisure travelers, while more full-service airlines may target business travelers a little bit more. And if you think about the times when you might be flying with a cello, it's probably going to be much more often for business than it is for pleasure. Although, to me, having a cello with me anywhere is pleasure. Now, I've never had a cello snafu with any of the major US airlines, American, Delta, and United. JetBlue will likely also be fine, but I do not have enough data to support that. I think I've only flown them with a cello once in my life. I'm typically an American flyer, and in fact, this sentence that I'm saying now, I wrote while I was waiting in the terminal for one of their flights, though this time not with the cello. When you go to book the cello, I've heard of people calling it different things. I always just go with extra seat, all one word, as the first name, and my same last name. And for the cello, I use my same date of birth, state of residence, gender, all that good stuff. But I do not put my TSA pre-check number in there, and I definitely don't try to put a frequent flyer number in there. Not mine, and definitely not an account for the cello. After seeing what Delta did to Lynn Harrell, I'm not gonna chance it. There's one more thing you need to know though. If you're going internationally, you may need to be careful about various materials in your equipment. A big one is ivory, which is found on many bows, but there are other materials that can cause problems too. I've never dealt with this myself, but you do want to make sure that you have all the necessary documentation to prove that you have your ducks in a row with regard to whatever materials are involved. The American Federation of Musicians has a handy guide on their website, which I'll link in the description. Of course, this has some US-centric information, but it's a good resource if your travels involve America! I'll link that in the description below. Once you've gotten everything sorted, there are a couple of other things that you can do to be safe. One is to email the airline and get it in writing that you have everything in good order. Something like, "Hello, I just booked 2 seats, one of which is for a cello that I'll be taking as cabin baggage. Can you confirm that everything is in order, according to the airline's regulations, and that there isn't anything that would result in me being denied boarding?" If you can't get in touch that way, or if you want to supplement it, you may opt to call a special assistance hotline if your airline offers one. These can be used for various requests, but in your case, you're going to ask about the cello. Same stuff you'll ask in the email, but at least you'll get slightly more immediate feedback. Still though, I like to have this stuff in writing whenever possible. Chapter 3. Old school check-in. Especially if you're not checking baggage, there's a good chance that you will never visit the check-in counter for an average flight. I mean, most of these airlines have apps, you just click the button, you check in, and you've got your boarding pass on your phone. It's usually easy as pie, and for a cello-less traveler without any checked luggage, there's no reason to go see an agent. But if you're in an extraordinary situation like traveling with a cello, I recommend doing it. This way, when you check in, you can say something like this. Since one of my seats is for my instrument as cabin baggage, I just wanted to check and make sure that my booking follows all of the regulations. I made sure to put it in a window and not in an exit row, and I know that I am sitting next to it. But I wanted to make sure that there's nothing that I missed that would result in me being denied boarding at the gate. Okay, we're checked in, and we have one more bit of reassurance as we go about our travels. So, let's go through security. Chapter 4. The Probe of Horror. Nobody likes long security lines. There's a reason that TSA PreCheck exists. And airports have been updating how they do security, presumably in part to make it a bit more streamlined and get people through there more quickly. But this can come at the detriment of traveling cellists. Let me explain. Some airports have put in more automated systems, where every single thing has to go in a bin, the bins get automatically stacked and routed throughout, and allegedly it's supposed to make things a little bit easier. But I've never met a bin that can fit a cello. And to make matters worse, some airports have gotten new scanners that are smaller, they only fit those bins, and therefore, no cello. So we're left with one terrifying option: manual inspection. Da da da! This is what I have to do at my home airport in Jacksonville. All the scanners are these fancy newfangled ones that just can't accommodate a cello. So every single time I bring my beloved companion with me, a manual inspection is needed. So I have the dreaded experience of handing off my case to a TSA officer, walking through the scanner, and meeting officer and cello on the other side. I meet the agent and begin the process of clenching every muscle in my body. Now, plenty of TSA agents are lovely people who are just doing their job, and they want to make sure that everybody has a good and safe experience. The especially lovely TSA agents have subscribed to this channel and are planning to press the like button on this video. Others, though, are on an absolutely wild power trip. And honestly, you don't know which category is going to better describe the agent that you get that day. So you need to play it safe. And the way I play it safe is by playing to their ego. Now, I'm generally not a fan of being obsequious for personal gain, but when the safety of your instrument hangs in the balance, putting a little bit of sugar on your words can be excused. Here's a basic framework for how I like to do it. Good morning. I know I need to get a manual inspection done on my cello, so can I go ahead and hand that off to you?
Absolutely, sir.
Great, thanks. And just to confirm, they'll wait to open it until I've met them on the other side, right?
Correct.
Then I go through the scanner as normal and wait for an agent to meet me on the other side. Once they come, I say something like this. I imagine you get cellos coming through this airport a lot, but just for my own peace of mind, is it okay if I help you out with opening the case? Your answer may vary, but often they'll be okay with it. Keep being as friendly as possible, but if you need to stand up for your cello, stand up for your cello. That can be done by politely asking for a supervisor. Something like, I know you're just doing your job, but I'm a bit worried for the safety of my instrument. Since it's a little bit tricky to open up the case, is it okay if I speak with a supervisor about this first, please? I think this is the most goosebump-inducing part of the experience for me, because it's the one time in your travels where you will not be in full control of your instrument. But once you've gotten through it, things will hopefully get a bit easier. Chapter 5, At the Gate. When you're at the gate, you can maximize your chances of success by... Johan, you're moving the camera. Oh, hey, come on, man. I'll play with you really soon. I just gotta finish filming, okay? Because the people need to know how to fly with a cello. When you're at the gate, you can maximize your chances of success by being a bit proactive. Once you see the gate agent and things are calm enough, you can approach and say something like this. Hi, I have a seat for my instrument. I just want to confirm that all the regulations are being followed and that the system knows that there's not a person in the seat. I'm in 9C and my instrument's in 9A. Also, once that's been updated, is it possible for me to get a couple of physical boarding passes, please? I like to get those passes in physical form because of a strange experience I had with Delta once. The gate agent entered my info into the system wrong, and it made it look like there was an open seat where my cello was supposed to be sitting. It was a super full flight, and they gave the cello seat to somebody who was on standby. Thankfully, they rectified the situation, but it was way too close for comfort for me. But I think it's good to have that physical proof in hand, just in case things go south. Finally, you can ask if you can pre-board. It's better to do this if you don't have any overhead luggage that you're bringing, because after all, that bin space is a hot commodity. And of course, you don't want to look like you're scamming the system just so that you can get some primo overhead real estate. I do something like this. And just to check with you, I usually pre-board in these situations just so that I can get settled without getting in everybody's way, and I don't have any overhead luggage, so I won't be using any bin space. Is that okay for me to do? You'll get a yes probably 8 to 9 times out of 10 in my experience. Now, as you may know, pre-boarding is usually reserved for people with disabilities, small kids, etc. So if none of those things apply to you, please do be decent and let any other pre-boarders go in front of you. Now, I've been lucky so far, like I said, and haven't had any issues. But in case you do, there are some pieces of documentation that you should bring, either in physical form or as a PDF on a tablet or phone or something. One is your rights. At least in the US, the Federal Aviation Administration publishes some rights that air travelers have. And the website Cello gives a handy link to a nice little one-pager that details what rights you have as a traveling cellist. Again, US-centric, sorry, but I will link it in the description. And if your travels involve the United States, I will also link the American Federation of Musicians travel kit, which gives you plenty of valuable information. Next thing you want is the airline's contract of carriage, along with screenshots of anywhere on their website where they talk about cabin baggage, musical instruments, etc. And of course, if you've emailed the airline to confirm that you are in compliance with their rules, make sure that you have those emails pulled up too. In case things go south, your best defense is having government and airline-specific policies with you that you can confidently reference. Chapter 6, On the Plane. By this point, the troubles are usually over. However, I once did get told by a flight attendant on my way onto the aircraft that my cello would not fit in the overhead bin. So I now have a proactive way to smooth things over. Good morning! I have a seat for my instrument with me. Is it possible to get an extender back in row 9 when you have a chance, please? Now, the extender that I'm referring to is a seatbelt extender, and it's exactly what it sounds like. And you'll probably need it. Your cello has to be belted in just like you do, and most of the time, the standard seatbelt just will not fit, unless you have a super small case. Great, let's take off. So, is your journey over? Not quite. Yeah, you're at your destination, but if this isn't your final stop, especially if you have a return trip or more flights on your reservation or whatever it is, you want to do one more thing. Give the airline a call and ask if your cello has been marked as flown. Now, what does that mean? You want to make sure that the airline's records indicate that your cello indeed did travel on that flight with you. And the reason for that is otherwise they might cancel the rest of the itinerary. Now, this is probably going to be a rare occurrence for it to not be marked as flown, but I started doing this after I had that experience with Delta where they mismanaged my ticket, and my worry was that I might not be showing in the system as having flown officially with my cello. So these are good things to check just in case. Now, there are various other things that people may want to consider depending on their airline of choice and the things that go along with it. For example, if you have elite status and you get a complimentary upgrade for yourself and the cello, make sure to call in if you can't get regulation compliant seats so that they can either fix that for you or switch you back to coach. You may also want to look into companion certificates that can be used for an instrument. I'm not sure how many airlines allow this exactly, but I remember back in the day I had a Delta Amex that gave me a companion certificate every year when I renewed it, so that made traveling with the cello a bit cheaper, but your mileage may vary. Wherever you're going, I hope that this helps you to avoid any and all travel nightmares. But before I go, I want to tell you about a few exciting things that are going on. First, my studio is open. I'm offering virtual lessons to cellists throughout the whole world via Zoom, and you can email me at mail@celloben.com and book a free half-hour trial lesson. Or if self-paced learning is more your vibe, I have an online cello course for adult beginners, which you can get at celloben.com/course. It teaches you everything you need to know, even if you've never played an instrument or read music in your life. And if you're looking into flying for an orchestra audition, perhaps you want to take advantage of one of my audition coaching marathons. We'll go for up to 3 hours together and examine the repertoire deeply to maximize your chances of success. And with that, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, a safe and happy holiday season, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye for now.